All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Chapter 13 discussion for this week. I want to let everybody know that if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please let me know. But what you're about to watch is a video that I've already recorded. I recorded this morning. I've been doing that the last few weeks to try and keep my videos a little bit shorter, so I don't blab on so much during these slides. I think I like the way that I'm doing it so far. If any of you have any comments or concerns, please let me know. But so far, I think it's kind of cut down a little bit on time because I try to speed up through this process. This weekend, so I'm actually recording this video on Friday the 17th, and so to let you know, Monday was going to be a very busy day. Is going to be a very, very busy day for me, so I wasn't going to be able to record these slides. I'm recording them on Monday or on Friday the 17th. This weekend on Sunday the 19th, you have an article due. Go out and find an article that interests you from the Journal of Educational Psychology and send it to me through Canvas. And then on the 26th is your last research reflection. It'll be your last one you have to write for the semester, and we only have 2 weeks left of class. So if you have any concerns about your grade or needing to turn work in, please email me as soon as possible. Let me know. Otherwise, have a great week. Enjoy the next few minutes of presentation, and I hope everybody has a great week. All right, bye y'all. All right, so the first concept we're going to talk about today is backwards design. And the idea behind backwards design is ultimately a very simple one in that you are providing a sort of a clear and objective instructional plan, set of activities, whatever it might be, in order to get a student or a worker or whoever it might be to a stated goal, right? So if you have an individual that maybe you just hired them on at your company and you need them to be able to exhibit some level of skill in this particular area, but they don't have that skill, you're going to train them, right? And so essentially we do the same thing in the schools. We don't students don't walk into kindergarten being expected to know physics or chemistry or trigonometry or whatever it might be. But ultimately, we expect students to get there. By the time you graduate from Pittsburgh High School, we expect you to have some basic knowledge of all these different areas of academics. And we, as a representative of USD 250, even though I'm not, we have developed this plan to, the moment that your son or daughter walks into our elementary school, whether they walk into Nettles Elementary or West Side Elementary, no matter where it is, we know that we have sort of um, this clear framework for instructing your student and this lesson plan that will help them get from where they are in kindergarten to where we need them to be by the time they finish high school. And there's been a big push for this in the last decade or so. I remember Texas doing this because of there was sort of this mismatch between what the schools were preparing and what the colleges were needing, essentially. And so what you saw in probably most states out there, is so the university system. So in Kansas, it would be KBOR, the Board of Regents going to the local, maybe a gathering of superintendents and saying, okay, so we know that in the field of biology, in order for an individual to get a job in biology, they need to be at sort of this level of knowledge or this skill level, right? And so we have essentially 120 credits of instructional time with that individual, with that student. And so if we sort of backwards map that, then the 120 credits, then we can get them. We need them to be right here, right? And so then USD 250 or whoever it might be, whatever school district it might be, they do the same thing. Okay, so we're going to translate. We're going to okay. Well, the superintendent goes back and says, okay, school board, KBOR says that they need our students to be up here. by the time they finish high school. So we are going to we're going to backwards design sort of, we know that we have 13 years with this student, and so we're going to backwards design this this lesson plan, this instructional plan to fit the developmental needs of a student, but also the instructional needs, so that whenever they graduate from our high school, that they are ready to go to KU or PSU or wherever it might be. And so it's a very simple concept, right? But there are some flaws with it. And one of the biggest ones that I can remember working with is the fact that if you work in an elementary school, you know immediately that as soon as a kindergartner walks into school, or a set of kindergartners walk into a particular school district or elementary school, they are not all at the same level, right? And so whenever you do some level of backwards design, then you expect students to sort of enter kindergarten here, right? And so whenever the student does not enter kindergarten at this level, then that creates some level of dissonance between sort of what we hope to be teaching this student, to sort of be getting them on that trend line, that career plan, if you will, the educational plan. And now we need to, the student is down, is further down here, and we need to do something to sort of remediate. And so schools have had to respond by implementing, more interventions and more supports in the schools, which is obviously not a bad thing. It's never a bad thing, but it has been, it does create systems where it's more resource intensive, right? And so it's important to consider that. And then also, there are issues of, as colleges get more and more expensive, as the schools become, as it becomes more expensive to go to University of Texas or University of California, Berkeley, or University of Kansas, or wherever it might be, then you have more parents and more students saying, maybe this isn't the best time to go to college. And especially, a few weeks ago, up to about a month ago, we had a very, very low unemployment rate and a very strong economy. And so you were seeing a lot of sort of issues of people saying, well, yeah, I can go to, I could go to college, sure, but that costs money, and I could also go and start working and just go ahead and get a job and start making money. And maybe it's not necessarily a career that I want, but it'll put money in my pocket. And so you have students that are choosing to not go to college, right? And so that is why, one of the many reasons why you see so many schools that are offering CTE programs, career tech ed programs, where essentially, the goal is to teach a student some level of a skill that they can graduate from Pittsburgh High School with, and they can go out and get a job. And hopefully that job will be one they can create a career with. And it'll be interesting to see how a lot of this shakes out with sort of this new post-coronavirus world, because of typically sort of the past data has suggested that whenever we are in a time of high unemployment, then universities are in a time of high enrollment, because individuals, young men and women all over the country decide, maybe this is the best time for me to go to college because I can't really find a job. And so it'll be interesting to see how that goes, and sort of an uncertain time as it is. And another interesting caveat with all this to consider is sort of how this can how it can sort of push students beyond what might be sort of educationally or developmentally acceptable, right? And so I always think about how we are sort of changing our needs as time goes on. And obviously that happens, right? But I'm thinking of a specific situation where I was working in California. I had a coworker who, her son was in kindergarten, and she was really, really anxious that her son was not going to be moved on from kindergarten, the reason was because his writing wasn't good enough. And I was kind of shocked because I mean, I have some semblance of memories of my elementary education, and I know I wasn't writing. I mean, I know for a fact that it was first grade was whenever they gave us those little dotted sheets with all the little letters, and that's whenever I started tracing the letters was in first grade, and this was back in Texas, um, and uh, and so I just remember sitting there thinking, wait, your son's doing writing and he's in kindergarten. She goes, yeah, and well, what does he have to write? And she goes, by the end of the year, he has to be able to write a sentence about a dog. And it said, she's like, I like my, and it has to have sort of a noun, a verb, and a sort of, it has to be a grammatically correct sentence, essentially. And it has to have some kind of adjective, some kind of, it can't just be, I like my dog. It has to be, I like my brown dog. I like my fluffy dog. I like my fat dog. And there has to be some kind of, some level of advanced thought going on there. And I was kind of shocked because that was not, I mean, even as, my nephew was in kindergarten, he's 7 now, so he's only 2 or 3 years ago. And I mean, he wasn't doing that. That wasn't sort of the goal for him in Texas. And again, all my family lives in Texas. And so, you see situations where essentially the needs of the California high school graduate has increased so significantly that now whenever they backwards design the instruction in California, in certain parts of California, the response has been that they are now, we don't even expect you to be able to read at kindergarten. We expect you to be able to read and have some high level of writing skills by the time you leave kindergarten. And so that's where, there can be sort of a rub between maybe the developmental progress that is appropriate for a child and what we are pushing children to do. So, but just some thoughts that I from me. Anyway, so some prerequisites for effective teaching. Not this is anything that anybody in this room is not aware, not this virtual room is not aware of, but essentially the prerequisites for this job is you need to be able to have some level of verbal ability that you can articulate your own level of understanding, your own knowledge about a certain topic or subject. You need to have obviously a very thorough understanding of the content that you're dealing with, and you need to be dedicated to your students. You need to be dedicated to helping them learn. You need to be dedicated to helping them improve, and you need to believe in sort of your deepest recesses of your being that all students can improve, right? And that's an interesting one because most people today sort of take that for granted and think, well, of course, we all know that all students can improve. But that hasn't always been the case in schools, right? I mean, tracking was a big issue, and honestly, tracking, we just call something different. There's probably always gonna be some level of tracking in the schools, but I mean, it was only a few decades ago, and depending on the state you live in, maybe even last decade, who knows, where you saw people being tracked and set on a different academic instructional tracks based on the color of their skin, or based on their gender, or their sex, or whatever it might be, and essentially that the underlying idea behind that, the theoretical orientation behind that, is that certain students will be less successful than others, right? And so it is a more recent in the last decade or so, maybe I can't speak for every state, but it is a more recent occurrence that we are trying to help teachers understand, and teachers are more willing to understand, that all students, no matter what, can improve. And it's not even necessarily just tracking based on race or based on sex. It could also just be disability level. And that's still happening to this day, where whenever I was working in California, if you were in special ed classrooms in math or in English or whatever it might be, the quality of your instruction, and we know this nationwide, the quality of instruction in most special education classrooms is lower. It is a lower quality of education, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? We're not saying that the teachers in those rooms are bad at all. The issues that we're having is that we have students that do struggle more in a particular area, and so we need to sort of slow the instruction down for that student, and we need to really make sure that we really have to add a lot of repetition and a lot of practice into that instruction in order for a student to fully understand the particular concept, right? So if we're looking at math, you're going to teach, sort of y equals mx plus b, but then you're going to do some reteaching, and then you're going to provide a lot of time for the students to have a lot more practice with that particular knowledge. And the issue is that by the time that classroom is ready to move on from that topic, the general education classroom or the regular ed classroom is already 2 lessons ahead because they've just been speeding through. And so that's where you do see a lot of movement toward, a lot of effort toward more inclusive practices, where you don't have special education classrooms anymore, which is not the purpose of this discussion, but ultimately all this goes into sort of the idea of all students can learn, right? All students can be successful in our general education classrooms, and then making sure that you have classrooms that are setting high expectations, right? If you are in a situation where you feel like the expectations that are set for you are very low, that the expectations are low, then you are less likely to put a whole lot of effort into that classroom. And we want to feel like we have earned something, right? When we finish a class, we want to feel like we have earned our grade, we have earned some level of knowledge that we did not have before. And if the teacher in that room sets these expectations that are very low, then and it's sort of a snap for me to attain that level of knowledge, then I will feel like I have not earned it. That it wasn't really, some would interpret that as being insulting, right? You have insulted my intelligence because I could easily do more than this, okay? So essential teaching skills, organization, review of past material, focus on and being able to maintain student attention. This one is incredibly difficult. It goes back to sort of the classroom management skills from last week, and that is one of the reasons why you want to enter the classroom. Make sure the students are working, bell to bell. You want there to be sort of no downtime, you want there to be very little ability to for their heads to sort of go this way or to go that way. You want them to be focused on the instruction or on whatever activity you have going on, right? And part of that is making sure that the activity, that the instructional level or the instruction that's taking place is interesting enough, right? So if I am a student in a history class and the teacher is teaching in a way that this just doesn't make sense or it's boring or whatever it might be, I'm going to check out. But my favorite history teachers were the ones that really brought history to life. They made it very interesting to me. And I mean, to this day, even though I am not, I wasn't a history major, that is not my profession, that is a personal interest of mine, right? Like the books that I read tend to have some level of historical nonfiction or fiction in them. And speaking of which, if any of y'all are Ken Follett fans, I'm currently reading Fall of Giants right now. It's an older book, but it's a very, very, very fun read if any of you are interested in historical fiction at all. Anyways, and also if you're a Downton Abbey fan, it's like the creator of Downton Abbey absolutely ripped off Ken Follett it's kind of crazy. Anyway, so back to what's important. So maintaining focus, which is a great example of what I did not just do. Doing a lot of questioning and really providing opportunities for students to think about their instruction and to think about what they're learning and to sort of chew on different ideas, not just be, not just sort of, I'm listening to Dr. Lloyd, he is talking, and I'm just taking it in and I'm just accepting. That's not what we want, right? That's not what I want. If you are ever in a position where you feel like you disagree with me, I want to say I've had a few students that have had some pushback to some of my ideas, and I actually do enjoy that. I really do enjoy it because it provides more learning opportunities for me, and it provides more learning opportunities for the student, right? And so adding opportunities for students to question certain things is important, okay? Giving feedback, giving consistent feedback, right? So that's why formative assessment is such a very useful skill to have in the schools. Essentially because formative assessment allows you for the opportunity to make several small assessments and providing just constant feedback to the students so they know what they're learning, they know where the needs are essentially. And then closure and application and providing some kind of ending to the lesson, and then communication. Always communicating, always trying to be very, very quick with their communication, very, very consistent. And that is one of the reasons that I really try to push for as open communication as possible in my classroom particularly. So those are some of the skills that you will probably more than likely honestly all of you already have, based on the writing that I've gotten from y'all, or the feedback that the dialogue that I've had with many of you. These are not really an issue for most of you. But these are, essentially skills that you want to be able to exhibit whenever you walk into the schools on day one. And so we're going to go over a few different instructional strategies. And the first one, and probably the most common one that you see in the schools, is direct instruction. And explicit direct instruction, is essentially going and giving some kind of direct lesson to the student and really teaching them how to do something, right? So this right here is sort of a web adapted version of direct instruction, right? So I am speaking, you are listening, and it is sort of this direct level of instruction. And again, so it has these 4 different stages: instruction review, developing understanding, guided practice, and that's where essentially we go a little off here with online classes, because I'm not the best about giving guided practice, so that's one of the reasons. So I try to give the research activities and stuff like that to kind of guide your own learning, guide what you want to do. But as far as giving you activities, you'll see some professors that will give like different worksheets and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily a big fan of those. Seem like a time waste, if I'm being honest. That's just my own opinion. And then providing some level of independent practice, right? So let's be open and upfront. If any of you have any lessons that you have learned as you are doing more online teaching, or as you are sort of exploring this topic more in your own personal practices, your own personal studies, and you have seen something that you think would be beneficial, then I'm always open to learning. I'm just not a big fan of worksheets. I think that they are, I think that we are, I have several opinions about them that aren't necessarily important in this context. So, but ultimately, direct instruction, especially in K-12, is really where you see most of the instruction taking place, the EDI. Then you have lecture discussion, and so, back when I was able to teach sort of in-person classes, this is what I tried to encourage as much as possible, is to encourage some level of discussion. And again, it's not just because I like to talk, but it's because classes are much easier when there's some level of sort of discussion, right? And so that's actually, as we sort of continue down this path of sort of web adapted online instruction for these classes, I'm going to be working hard to use Zoom, because I love Zoom. I've really fallen in love with Zoom over the last few weeks. I try to use Zoom as much as possible to try and sort of encourage online meeting, and so there's online discussion that we can have. And but ultimately, so it comes down to the components are, there's a lecture taking place, right? So I'm giving you a lecture, and as you have questions, you raise your hand, you might discuss with me, or I will ask questions of the students, and it will provide some level of discussion going on. And there are some methods that you can do this online. Some professors I know at Pitt State like to do sort of checkpoints within their videos. They'll do this video, and sort of as you get to minute 24, then hey, we're at minute 24:50 right now. As you're at minute 24, then you will, and sort of the video will stop, and you'll be expected to provide some response to a quiz question. And that's sort of getting at the same idea. They're trying to give you, well, it's not, they're trying to maintain your focus, first of all. But also they're trying to provide some level of sort of feedback, of discussion, of checking understanding. And so all those are very, very good methods to use in the schools, especially as we are using more online learning. And yeah, I mean, so the big goal about discussion is just making sure that students are comprehending the instruction that is taking place. So guided discovery is obviously more sort of flexible. It's more so there is some level of instruction. There is sort of this opening of the lesson, and then you will have some review of this concept. So this is not going to be your sort of your first go-to. If you are opening a new chapter on, I always go to the U.S. Civil War, right? You're not going to, or sea creatures if you're in biology or whatever it might be. If you're opening some new segment of instruction, your go-to will probably not be guided discovery, but as you have given some kind of lesson, you have taught these students sort of this beginning amount of information, then you will move to sort of a guided discovery method where whenever I was in science class in high school, we would learn about sort of aerodynamics, this idea of aerodynamics, and then the next day or a few days later, we'd go outside and we would we'd shoot off rockets, or whenever I was in science class, there's a lot of this in labs have a lot of this sort of guided discovery. And there would be some kind of lesson, and then we would learn the anatomy of a frog or the anatomy of a squid first, and then we'd go into the lab and then we'd cut one open. And so it's essentially just providing some kind of activity in the middle of the lesson, and then you bring back and we have a discussion about what learning took place, and the teacher is there to sort of guide the discussion and figure out sort of where any holes are in the knowledge and the understanding. And then cooperative learning is essentially whenever you have students that are in mixed ability groups. So the one that I always think of the most is a program that is called PALS, Peer Assisted Learning Strategies. And you might have heard me talk about this quite a bit in the past because I love PALS. It was my dissertation topic, and Um, and so essentially within peer-assisted learning strategies or PALS or peer-assisted learning in general, what you do is you have a higher learner and a lower learner, and then you partner them together, and they take the time to essentially kind of teach each other, right? And so the benefits of sort of peer-assisted learning is that it actually does benefit both students, right? So I am the instructor, and I say all these, I try to teach you with direct instruction. I am teaching, I'm teaching, I'm teaching, and you, for whatever reason, are not necessarily grasping the words that are coming out of my mouth or the instruction that I'm giving, and so it's important for us to provide some different kind of, some differentiation, right? And so that's the point where we will go in and we can do peer assisted learning. And at that point, now you have a student who is a peer and might have a better understanding of the lack of understanding of the student, and and they are able to provide the instruction that maybe you're not able to provide as the teacher, right? And so it's more that knowledge, that idea of this is a learning community that we discussed a few weeks ago. And the one detractor that I was able to see in the literature is that essentially there's this idea that, I haven't really seen this in the elementary level with the reading program, but I can imagine it being in the high school. If you have I remember myself from sort of college group work and high school group work is essentially group work, whether it be 2, 3, 4, 5 people, who it doesn't matter how many people it is. Group work can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and so there is this. It is very easy to sort of defer to other, right? So whenever you're doing group work, I mean, we did this in grad school, and so you would sort of nominate one person to be sort of the representative of your group, and oftentimes whenever you're doing peer-assisted learning, you're going to have a lot of times where the higher functioning students are going to be the ones that are sort of the group leader. And they're going to do the talking for the group, they're going to do all the communication for the group, and it's going to be hard for you as the teacher to know if if the lower performing student is fully learning. So that is one detractor. But I mean, especially at the elementary level, these programs have been found to be very, very useful and very effective in improving learning. Although math is an issue. My dissertation was actually on PALS math, because there's not a whole lot of research about PALS math in the schools, and it actually wasn't that effective. And so maybe there is some utility for this program, but overall the evidence that I've seen in the literature, PALS reading is fantastic. PALS math, there's really not enough literature out there. There's not enough published articles out there to fully know if this is just a bad program or just some unlucky studies, or maybe just some particular students based on sort of population issues with the students. But ultimately, I would avoid using PALS math. PALS reading is great, though. All right. So flipped instruction, and essentially flipped instruction uses a format like this, right? So probably most of you are using sort of a flipped instruction kind of model right now, and it is essentially where the idea behind it is that we have so little time in the schools to really deliver all the instruction that we need, and so we will provide our lectures, we'll provide our instruction sort of outside using a video or a Prezi or a PowerPoint or whatever kind of video format you might use, and we will deliver the instruction. So essentially, I know that As a teacher, I have 50 minutes to teach you all of this material. There's no way I can do that. And so I'm going to provide you my lessons. I'm going to provide you my instruction. I'm going to provide you my these videos that will give the instruction at home. I want you to watch that at home and then come back to school and we're going to practice it. We're going to do a lot of practice, right? And so the issue there, though, is that that assumes that all students have a sufficient level of access to instructional materials. So the internet is a big issue, and then also that they have technology. So some students don't have have easy access to a computer or a laptop or whatever it might be. And then also it just assumes that they have time to watch a video, watch an instructional video at home. The reality for a lot of our students these days is that they have to babysit. They have to take care of brothers or sisters, or they have to, spend time doing things that are, other than school. And so it is assuming a lot to assume that we can sort of send work home, send these videos home, and expect them to watch them and learn them, and then the next day we will have some kind of instruction on them. But flipped instruction, it can be a useful tool, obviously, and as we are in this sort of this new web-based learning, online learning format, there is more flipped learning, flipped instruction going on. Obviously, minus the in-person part, but you might see a lot of teachers that are sort of providing sort of this video and then providing an opportunity to have like Zoom meetings, and also if any of you need, I just want to take this moment to reiterate, if any of you need office hours, I have, due to sort of just lack of demand, I have sort of canceled not really canceled, I stopped logging in to the online Zoom hours on Monday afternoons, but if you ever need sort of online office hours, as I'm thinking about flipped instruction, if you ever want to employ a flipped instruction model, please email me. All right, not much else going on these days. Just the the excitement of my week is Tuesdays when I get to take out the trash. So other than work, obviously, I actually do enjoy my work. All right, so content differentiation. So earlier I mentioned the PALS program, the peer assisted learning strategies, and that is a fantastic content differentiation program. And ultimately, what content differentiation is is the knowledge of. So I, instructor, have taught in this format, right? So if I'm teaching math, and then I have taught math in this method, right, in method A. But I know as a math teacher that method B, method C, method D could all be useful and could all be correct ways of doing certain math problems. And so I'm going to provide content differentiation to help the students learn those different methods of learning math, right? And so it's really, ideally, we are getting away from this idea that whenever I was in high school, I had math teachers that every year would always say, you have to show your work, and of course you do. Not for any future math teachers, I'm not trying to tell you that you shouldn't show your work, but they would also say, if you don't do the problem the way that I do it, that's wrong. You will get it wrong. And because ultimately, what we know is that obviously not everybody learns the same way. Not everybody grasps the material in the same manner that that other people do. And so I think that it's important that we are just teaching in as many different modes as possible, right? One issue is it can be very work intensive for teachers to provide this kind of instruction, but ultimately, I think that it can be very doable through stuff like after school tutoring, before school tutoring, during lunch tutoring, whatever it might be. Those are opportunities that, if you don't necessarily have the time to do it when you're in the classroom during that 50-minute block that you have, then you can, ideally try to do that lesson, try to do that advanced learning during a different, or maybe I guess remedial learning, if you will, or during a different block of time. All right. And so using assessments for learning. So this is actually where I want to have our discussion for this week. Is next week I believe we'll be discussing assessments. We'll be discussing testing. And so I want to discuss testing, right? And so there is this, obviously we use assessments in schools, and we design tests to sort of just check understanding, to check, like in this class, I have, the tests that I give are really just, making sure that you're cracking the book open, and that you are, that there's some level of comprehension taking place as you are moving through this class, and it's likely going to be the same way for your classes as teachers. And so, so those tests are essentially different than what I want to discuss this week. So, all right. So the discussion I want to have this week is about testing, and so specifically large-scale testing, specifically sort of state testing. You can discuss SATs. You can discuss sort of end of course exams. Essentially this idea that we have to have sort of these large standard or norm referenced tests or criterion referenced tests in order to get school funding, in order to graduate from high school. If you want to, depending on the state you live in, if you want to get a raise as a teacher, you're going to need to improve your testing scores. And so I want to discuss that. That's a discussion we're going to have this week as we prepare for next week. So this is the instructional topic for next week. And so I want to discuss sort of this idea of large-scale testing. What are your thoughts of the utility in the schools? Is it useful in the schools? Is it beneficial in the schools? And what no caller ID. All right. So should testing be used to evaluate your job and the quality of your teaching? So essentially, what, and don't just say, no, testing should not be used to evaluate my job, but provide some level of some alternative, right? So if you don't want teaching to be how your job is evaluated, then provide some level of response to what alternative can there be. Instead of focusing on my end of course exams that you go to the state, rather focus on how many students I have passing AP tests, or maybe focus on the number of students that are going from my class and taking AP classes, or going from my class and going to college, or going from my class, or just the quality of the instruction that I'm doing, level of engagement in my classes, so whatever it might be. Have we gone too far down this road of accountability by requiring that schools test students and test them quite often, and also, just what are your thoughts on testing, on this large scale or statewide testing? All right. Other than that, I hope everybody has a great week. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and let me know. All right. Bye, y'all.